You guys may remember that a number of months ago, big tremors got felt throughout the studio industry because a new law got passed that basically said this: a owner of a copyright that sold that copyright off can, after 35 years for nothing, just come back and say, we're taking our copyright back. Now, this, of course, started a big court case that's going on. We're in the middle of it right now with Marvel and a bunch of estates and families of people who originally owned the copyrights to a number of the Marvel characters, and they're trying to get those copyrights back, and Marvel is, of course, fighting it. Now, there's no new developments there, but a new movie has come into the fray that's really rather interesting, and that's Top Gun Maverick. This is interesting. So here's the basic gist of it. Top Gun, the original movie, was based on an article. Now, the writer of that article sold the rights to Paramount to make this movie. But that was over 35 years ago. Now, where it really gets interesting is that Top Gun Maverick was supposed to come out before that 35 years lapsed, but of course, COVID came up, global pandemic got pushed, and Top Gun Maverick has now come out after that 35 years lapse. And in 2018, the widow and the son of the guy who wrote that article, in 2018, they filed to get that copyright back that went into force in 2020. So now they are suing Paramount right now for big money, number one, and number two, to have Top Gun Maverick pulled out of theaters. This comes to us from the folks where I lost my spot here. There it is. This comes to us from the folks over at Variety, and they've got a really good article. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs here because I find this absolutely fascinating. It says this: the original Top Gun was based on a 1983 article in California Magazine. On Monday, the author's heirs sued Paramount Pictures, claiming that the studio is profiting wildly from the sequel. Of course they are. Top Gun Maverick, even though it no longer holds the copyright to the magazine story. The article's author, now you got to forgive me if I mispronounce the names here, Ehud Yoneh, died in 2012. His widow, Sash Yoneh, and son, Yuval Yoneh, filed a notice in 2018 reclaiming the copyright to the story, which took effect in 2020. In the lawsuit, they argue that Paramount distributed Top Gun Maverick without obtaining a new license to use the underlying material. The suit seeks damages as well as an injunction that would bar Paramount from distributing the film, even though it's already in theaters right now. Top Gun Maverick is currently the top grossing film in theaters with a domestic haul of nearing $300 million. Now, another interesting twist in all this is that one of the lead lawyers who is representing the families trying to get the Marvel characters IP back is the same lawyer that these guys just went out to get to represent them for Paramount. Now, look, does this family actually want Top Gun Maverick pulled out of theaters? No. What they want, though, is to put Paramount's feet to the fire and say, guess you better settle with us for like a huge amount of money. It'd be a shame if suddenly Top Gun Maverick had to get pulled out of theaters. Now, of course, we don't know if they have a lot of weight to this, but I've read a couple of legal analysts who are saying, you know what? By the letter of the law, there's some legs here to this thing. Not saying that it would be successful, not saying that they would win against Paramount, but I've read some analysis saying there are some legal legs to this thing. And that might just be enough to make Paramount say, screw it, sign a $25 million check and just give it to them or whatever. But Rob, we've been seeing this now popping up more, obviously most prominently with the Marvel stuff. We also heard it's being brought up with the Predator stuff. There's another lawsuit going on regarding Predator with people wanting to get the IP back. I've always felt this was a fundamentally unfair rule because while you and I are both clearly all for IP creators' rights, when you sell something, you sell something. You shouldn't be allowed to come back later and just take it back. There is obviously nuance to that in some different circumstances. But we're looking at this now with Top Gun. What do you make of this story and what stands out to you the most about it?
Well, at a cursory glance, and not, you told me about this today. I haven't even read this article, but I would say this: the underlying material, if you're going to make a sequel, usually in the rights deal that you make for the underlying material, those provisions are taken into consideration. Like you would pay the writer of that article more money if there is a sequel made. Like, so when you guys negotiate a contract, we always say it ain't show friends, it's show business. When you negotiate a contract now, let's say you've written an original screenplay. You, as the writer, have negotiated if there's going to be a sequel, if there's going to be a TV series. All of that is in your initial contract. I'm willing to bet back in 1983, obviously, clearly they didn't, that when they bought the rights to the article, they didn't. The author, he's like, great, buy my article. You know, so it's not even in like Time or Newsweek. It's in this California lifestyle magazine that Don Simpson probably read. He was probably doing lines off the pages and said, oh, this is interesting.
Then he heard the Taco Bell gong and thought, I have an idea.
Yeah, I mean, and so what they should have done, and I don't know why they didn't do this, because this happens more than you would think. When they made that Dukes of Hazzard movie for Warner Brothers,
right,
they didn't get the underlying rights to the TV show. They didn't lock up those rights. And you're like, wait, what? How can this happen? Those lawyers, this is what you pay the big bucks for these studio lawyers for. They should have gone back and renewed. They should have gone back and paid for that article again and looked into that. Because those are the very underlying rights underneath this movie. And they screwed up, because it's like, you don't just get to use things at anybody. Any studio, the first thing I would have asked as a producer is, wait a minute, we do have these underlying rights, don't we? That should have been the first thing that you looked at, but they didn't. And that happens more and more now, because like you'd think somebody pays for something once, but they only paid for it to make a movie. And it's been 36 years later. Well, it was 32 years later when they made the movie. They should have looked into this. It should have been handled. As a producer, that would have been the first thing I would have said. I would say, okay, wait a minute. This is based on an article. It's 30 plus years later. Do we still have the rights? Because I would have thought the deal would have, it's not just the copyright on the article, because the copyright's the copyright, but the studio might have only bought it unless they bought it in perpetuity throughout the universe forever, but I bet they didn't. So clearly they didn't. Now there's a real, genuine court case. And I think you're right. They're going to settle, and probably for a big chunk of cheddar.
We want to take a moment and thank the sponsor of today's video, Storyblocks. Guys, I have been an enthusiastic fan and user of Storyblocks for years. I go to them whenever I'm in need of content creation assets like royalty-free music, video clips, or templates for my creative projects, ranging anywhere from little editorial videos to my very own full-feature documentary. Storyblocks helps you bring your stories, videos, and projects to life without sacrifices due to time, budget, or access to resources. They have over 1 million different story assets, ranging from stock videos, audio and music, an in-browser video editor, and they feature pre-designed templates, animations, and outros. Storyblocks uses an affordable subscription model, and their unlimited access plans offers, unlimited video and audio downloads rather than a costly pay-per-clip model. With Storyblocks, you'll be able to create more content and, more importantly, better content, all while using a subscription plan that fits your budget, utilizing unlimited downloads of demand-driven and diverse content. So if you're interested in upping your content creation game, head over to www.storyblocks.com/Campea and get started today. That's www.storyblocks.com/Campea. Chris, you hear about this? I mean, look, people, when anybody is making money, wherever you see somebody making a lot of money, you will see in the shadows of the trees a bunch of people lining up to sue those people for one reason or another to get some of that money.
Yeah.
But what do you think is going to happen here, and what stands out to you about it so far?
It's the American way. It seems like such a cash grab, right? And of course, like Rob was saying, this is step one when you're producing a film. Let's make sure we have all of our I's dotted, our T's crossed, to make sure we actually own the thing we're trying to do. But in their defense, 2020 was like 15 years, and this movie was supposed to come out before. I do think it's super, super odd to buy something and then not own it. I don't understand that concept. And I know it's so that, IP can be done by other people and all this other stuff, but this whole situation is just gross, honestly. It just seems like such a weird cash grab. First of all, who reads California Magazine? Who read
Is it
this
even
back in the
still a
80s?
thing?
I don't
even know if it's still a thing.
My understanding is that it's a Berkeley Alumni Association magazine.
Well, then there's no excuse.
So, I mean, Berkeley grads, what's going on? This is beneath you. I just think this is so tacky. That's my biggest issue with this. The whole thing just feels gross. And this is something that we should be celebrating how well Top Gun's doing. And we're going to talk about that later.
Oh, they are.
Yeah,
they're
but-
celebrating.
Make no
But
mistake.
to be fair, if I found out that, let's say, I don't know, what's a Squid Game? Let's take a recent big hit. Okay. Let's say that I came up with the concept of Squid Game when I was 12. Okay. So you're going back decades. And I had sold for a pack of bubble gum and a hamburger, I'd sold the rights to it to somebody else, whatever. To be fair, if I found out now today that even though really in the spirit of it, I really should have no right to any of that. But if I found out today that there was a perfectly legitimate legal avenue that was available to me, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't admit right now, I'd be investigating how I can get some of them millions of dollars put into my lap too. If it's a totally legal above way thing that's a part of legislation that's been passed and it's a part of the law of the land and it was legal there for me to try to get some of that money, I gotta tell you guys, it may feel icky, but who among us, if it was totally legitimate, wouldn't at least investigate getting some of that money?
Ray Ora wouldn't.
Ray Ora wouldn't. Nah.
He's too pure and sweet. He'd be
He'd
like,
just be like,
well,
give me a hot toy and I'm
yeah.
good.
But you know, John, you pointed something out. I mean, again, we always belabor this point, but this is a legitimate cost. I mean, the origins of Top Gun was based on this article. The first thing you should have done is secured the basis of your sequel.
Yeah, this is a complete lack of due diligence on the part of the producers of Top Gun.
100%, and the studio.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
granted, this is a relatively new thing, right? I mean, so this whole thing about people being able to come back and get their copyright back after 30-something years, this is a relatively new thing, so it may have blindsided some people, but if you're paying attention and this is your job, they should have been all over this.
Yeah, and it's not even an issue of copyright. I mean, it's to me, I mean, it is an issue of copyright, but in terms of them, you know, they owe money. You can make one movie unless it specifically states in the contract you can make a sequel. You can't just go ahead and make a sequel. You got to pay again.
And even with the laws changed and new rules and new court cases, guys, question is for you. What do you think about this? There's a family saying, the rights to Top Gun are ours again. You didn't pay. Paramount's obviously going to dispute this. What do you think is going to turn out here? I'll tell you exactly how this is going to turn out. Spoiler alert. Here's how it's all going to work out. Paramount's going to write a check. The only question is at this point is how big is that check going to be? But they're going to write a check. Top Gun won't get pulled out of theaters, but they'll use it as leverage. Anyway, guys, what do you make of all this? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts.